It's now a great privilege and a great honor to welcome Rabbi Schachter Shlita this evening, the final word, not only the final speaker, but the final word for us on this topic. I want to take this opportunity, Rebbe, on behalf of Klal Yisrael, to thank Rebbe for the leadership, for the Piskei Halacha, for the tshuvas that have guided us over these 8-9 months. It's not an exaggeration to say that we would have been lost without Rebbe's guidance, not only halachically, but that sense of calmness and that sense of peaceful and serene way of guiding us through Yamim Tovim and through difficult shailas, and for us to be at ease to know that we have a posek and we have a gadol and we have a rav and a rebbe upon whom we can rely in crises and in difficult circumstances and in the best of times is a tremendous gift for which we are all incredibly grateful. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu just continue to give Rebbe only good strength and good health to continue to guide us, to continue to teach us, to continue to inspire us. Everybody knows that Rav Schachter is Rosh Hashiva, Rosh Kollel, Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan, posek of the OU, and posek for so much more. On this topic, a final and third perspective, the question of wearing Techeiles within the Masorah, to be able to have one of the Balei HaMasorah of our generation present is truly an honor and a privilege. I'll never forget in Meir Sharm Geula, even, when you walk into Sfarim stores that sell Techeiles, and they have samples and models for the different ways that Techeiles can possibly be tied on a garment. It has hanging off the corner an example, Rashi, Rambam, Rav Schachter, among the examples of opinions of exactly what is the right way to tie. And that in itself, not that that's evidence that we need of Rav Schachter's authority in this area and in so many others. Rabbi, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Without any further ado, Rav Schachter Shlit.
Shalom Aleichem, good evening, everybody. I find this very educating. I didn't know all these ideas that the first two speakers presented. And this is a wonderful idea. This should be a haskalah every Thanksgiving, even when we'll have Shana K'Tikkunah. We should organize Shiurim. Why not? That's a beautiful way to celebrate Thanksgiving. When the Radziner Rebbe came up with his chiddush regarding the chalazon, he thought that he had identified which is the correct chalazon. So, as the previous speakers pointed out, many Rabbanim agreed with him and many disagreed. So it's known that the Beis Halevi, that was the great-grandfather of Rabbi Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik, who used to teach in Yeshiva University, the Rav, his great-grandfather after whom he was named, Yosef Dov Halevi, he was opposed. But there are two totally different versions of why he was opposed. So the Radziner Rebbe put out 3 different svarim. Now they print all the 3 svarim in one volume that's called Shlosha Sifrei HaTecheiles. And the third sefer, he has all of the reactions of the various Rabbanim from all over Europe to his chiddush, to his discovery of the chalazon. So he has a letter from a person who claims to be an acquaintance, a close acquaintance of the Beis Halevi, doesn't give you the name of the person, and he sends a letter to the Radziner Rebbe to say why the Beis Halevi, why Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik was opposed, and he says the following: this, what they say, the cuttlefish or whatever, the squid fish. He said this fish was known to our parents and our grandparents, and they knew that it spits up black fluid, and they never used it. So how can you tell me that this is the chalazon? If the fact that our parents, our grandparents knew about this fish, that it has this black fluid in it, and they didn't use that fluid as chalazon, indicates that we have a masorah that it's wrong. That's why we can't accept what you said. But if you would come up with some other fish and give us a historical explanation as to why the Techeiles disappeared in the days of the Gaonim, he says, I'll be the first one to go along with you, and I'll use the Techeiles. But it cannot be this fish, because it's like we have a masorah that it's wrong, because our parents knew about this and they didn't use this dye. The Soloveitchik family, both the family in Eretz Yisrael, the children of Rabbi Zelvala Soloveitchik and his grandchildren, and the Soloveitchiks in America, the children of Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik, and I think the Soloveitchik family in Switzerland as well, they all have a totally different version of what the Beis Halevi said. Their version is that in order to identify what the chalazon is, you have to have a masorah. And a masorah has to be ish mipi ish, has to be an oral transmission from one generation of a religious person to the next generation. You cannot restore a Masorah. If a Masorah was lost, you cannot restore a Masorah by looking in a dictionary or by archaeological proofs, even if archaeology is emes, but that's not called a Masorah. You have to have a Masorah, you have to have a tradition from religious people telling over other religious people what the Chalazon is. And in fact, this is the way Rab Soloveitchik is to say. The Gemara says that if you eat orez, there's one opinion, Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri is of the opinion that there are not just chameshes minei dogan, wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt, that orez is also min dogan. So so we don't pass like Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri, orez v'dochen. We don't pass like Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri, but a little bit we accept his opinion. So the Gemara says in brachas that if you eat orez, the bracha in it, the bracha before you eat it is bar minim zaynis, and the bracha after you finish eating it is not ala michya, but rather bar nefashis. So what is orez? So Taisa says only orez, not dochen. So the question is, so what is orez and what is dochen? So one opinion is orez is rice and dochen is millet or something else, and the other opinion is no, dochen is rice. So if you ask, I live in Washington Heights. If you ask any of the neighbors here, we have a lot of Puerto Rican neighbors. Everybody knows arroz is rice. You ask any Arab in Eretz Yisrael, arroz is rice in different languages all over the world. Orez is something like orez, arroz is right. So the Soloveitchik say, no, since the Masorah was lost, what is orez? And the halacha distinguishes between orez and dochen. It's only orez that you say the bracha rishayna is bar minim zaynus and the bracha achrayna is bar nefashos. Since we don't know which one is orez, even though you have all the dictionaries in the world to indicate that orez is the rice, we don't follow the dictionary. We lost the Masorah, so it's a tzvekei dina. So you don't say bar minim zaynus on rice. You say bar pri hadom because it grows from the ground. This is what they insist. So whenever Rab Soloveitchik would say this over, when he said it in yeshiva, so the students, we used to tremble when he said the shir. So no one asked them, we rarely asked any kashas in the middle. You can't say no one ever asked. We didn't dare to ask kashas in the middle of shir. When he used to say this for the Balabatim didn't sit there so much. So remember the Balabatim, when he used to give the shir every Tuesday night in Maria was a shul in the middle of Manhattan on Broadway, in the corner of Broadway and Hadiah Street. So every Tuesday night, Rav Soloveitchik gave a shir there for many, many years. So when he said it there, the Balabatim were free to ask kashas. So they said, how can you say that you don't, if you don't have a tradition, you can't restore a tradition based on archaeology. The Gemara in the middle of Barbasu tells about Rabbi Bar Chana, who was taking, he had an Arab, Hutaya, sounds like a plain Arab, was giving him a guided tour of the Midbar, where the Mesa Midbar were. He was showing Rabbi Bar Chana where the dead Jewish bodies were who died in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu. The bodies were still there. And then he showed him where Blue Korach, where Korach Badosa got eingezunk when they were swallowed up under the ground in the earth. So and Rabbi Bar Chana leaned over and I heard him screaming out, Moshe Emes v'Saros Emes v'Anachnu Badoim. So that when Rabbi Bar Chana came back to the yeshiva and he was telling all the Talmidim in the yeshiva about his summer tour, where he traveled in the summertime, and the Arabs showed them the Mesa Midbar, so they asked Rabbi Bar Chana, did you check the tzitzis to see who's right? Because there's a machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, how many strings they put on tzitzis. So Beis Hillel are of the opinion to take 3 long strings, he fold them over, it turns out to be 6. And Beis Shammai are of the opinion to take 4 long strings, he fold them over to make 8. This is one of there are many disputes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. The overwhelming majority of the cases we pass on like Beis Hillel. But Taisus points out in the beginning of Sukkah Dav Gimel, there are 6 cases. We have a tradition from this Rav Amram Goen, writes in the Siddur, that there are 6 cases in Shas where we pass on like the Beis Shammai. In addition to the Yud Ches Geiros, but we also pass on like Beis Shammai. The Yud Ches Davar, the next day when the Beis Hillel came back to the Beis Medrash, so the Beis Hillel agreed with the Beis Shammai. So that those 18 cases don't count. But there are 6 cases where there's really a dispute, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and we pass on like the Beis Shammai. So one of them is you take 4 strings, you fold them over, you make 8. So they asked Rabbi Bar Chana, did you look at the tzitzis of the Mesa Midbar to see in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, did they do like Beis Hillel or like Beis Shammai? So he says, it didn't occur to me to look, to try to be poshet, the machlekes who's right. So they said to him, "What an idiot! You're a moron. Rabbi Bar Bachana is so stupid." You see, the Mason Midbin don't even try to check to see. But if Rabbi Soloveitchik is right, if the way they say from the Beis Halevi that if you don't have a Masor, you can't restore a Masor in Halacha by archaeology, period. No, Masor is about it's wrong, and even if it's right, it's wrong. If you don't have a Masor, Ish Mipi Ish Ab Moshe Rabbeinu. So why would they angry Rabbi Bar Bachana if it's not going to help at all? Then there's also a Gemara. The Gemara has, in the days of the Tanoim who were discussing the issue, there was already no Beis HaMikdash. So the Tanoim had a machlekes. The Kohen Gadol was supposed to wear the tzitz. Al mitzcha tamid. Al mitzcha we usually assume means on his forehead. And Taisus quotes that the Targum Onkelos translates al mitzcha beinei nohi. Sounds like tefillin is supposed to be. Oyur tetav is beinei necha. Beinei necha means above the hair. The tefillin shalosh is over here. So Taisus says it would appear from the Targum Onkelos that the tzitz was over here. It wasn't on the forehead. Al mitzcha rather means over here on the hair, wherever. So the Chumash says that you have to have engraved on the tzitz 2 words, Kodesh LaHashem. So there's a machlokes hatanoim. None of these tanoim live bisman abayis, and they're discussing something that they never saw. Each one had a tradition from earlier generation. What did it look like? So one opinion is that the 2 words were straight in a row, Kodesh LaHashem. The other opinion is no, very strange. It said Kodesh Lamed, and on a higher line above that it said Yud Kei Vav Kei. So that Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei should be above the line where it says Kodesh La. Kodesh La and Yud Kei Vav Kei higher. Machlokes hatanoim. So one Tana says, don't tell me, I was in Rome. The Gemara tells the whole story of what he was doing in Rome. He was in Rome and he did a favor to the emperor. He saved the emperor's grandchild or something like that, or his daughter. I forgot the whole story. And then they asked him whatever he wants, he can go in the Vatican and take whatever he wants from the Beis HaOitza that they have. So he saw that they had the tzitz. They had kalim from the Beis HaMikdash, had the tzitz, and the tzitz had Kodesh LaHashem on 1 line. It wasn't on 2 lines, Kodesh La and Yud Kei Vav Kei above. So he quotes this as a raya. He's proving what the din is based on archaeology. So you see, beferish, the Tanoim do believe in. There was no Masora. There was a machlokes hatanoim. There was no clear Masora how you're supposed to write Kodesh LaHashem, and they're being pushed the machlokes based on archaeology. So you see that it is legitimate. There is a way to restore a Masora. What's strange is that the Rambam paskins against that. The Gemara says he saw the tzitz in Rome, and it's on 1 line, and then the Rambam paskin is supposed to be on 2 lines. So the case of Mishnah, if Yosef Kara in his commentary on the Rambam asks, how does he paskin against the Metzias? But they saw it in Rome. They saw the tzitz. It's on 1 line. So the case Mishnah says every Kohen Gadol had to wear a tzitz that would fit his head or his forehead, wherever he's supposed to put it. So some of the Kohen Gedolim had a wide head, some had a narrow head, some were taller than others, some were fatter than others, and so on. So there must have been many tzitzin. There were many Kohen Gedolim. There must have been many tzitzin. So just because they found one that had Kodesh LaHashem on 1 line doesn't necessarily mean that they were all made like that. That's what the Kes Mishnah says. That Rambam thinks the din should be on 2 lines, and they happen to find the quirk of its tzitz. Just like there was a machlokes hatanaim. So through the generations, there was a machlokes of the Kohanim Gedolim, how you're supposed to make the tzitz. So some of them made it in 1 line, and the Rambam says, more correct, it's supposed to be on 2 lines. That's what the Kes Mishnah says. But I'll call upon him, don't you see from the whole discussion of the Tanoim, that you can reconstruct, you can revive a Masorah based on archaeology. And then the Rishonim quote, there was a machlokes Rashi and the Rabbi Tam about the Seder HaParshas in the Tefillin, Kadesh v'yo keviacha shma v'yoyim shamoyo, or Kadesh v'yo keviacha v'yoyim shamoa shma. How do you arrange the 4 parshas in the Shalrosh? So the Rishonim quote, the Mordechai quotes this, and in the Tur they quote, the Prisha quotes it in the Tur. They found in Keva Yecheskel HaNavi, I think he's buried in Bavel. They found the Keva Yecheskel HaNavi. They claim they found a pair of film like Rabbi Tam, the 2 v'hayos in the middle. And it's an old pair of tefillin from the days of the Bais Rishon, from the days of Yecheskel HaNavi. So doesn't that show that the Rabbeinu Tam is right, that that's the correct Seder HaParshios? So the others claimed, maybe they were puzzle at tefillin. That's why they were going as them. And the Kevi Yechezkel, maybe they were puzzle. Who says that they were kosher? Maybe they were puzzle. Or others suggest that's in the Torah Shlema. He has a suggestion. Maybe the din that the Seder HaParshas is miakev, maybe that was a din d'Rabbanan that was developed in the later generations, in the days of the Gemara. Maybe because otherwise you don't understand, how could they be a machlekes Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam? What's the Seder HaParshas? Nobody knows what they did last year. A mitzvah that you do every single day of the year. How can it be that they forgot what's the Seder? So that's what the Reb Mendel Kasha suggests in the Torah Shlema, that maybe the din always was you have to have Daled Parshas, whatever order you have is acceptable. And then in the days of the Amoraim, they came up with a din d'Rabbanan, a new Chiddush has to be dafka in a certain order, and that's machlekes Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. What's the correct order? So it's not going to help that you're going to find from the older generations a pair of tefillin like the Seder of the Rabbeinu Tam, like the Seder of Rashi, because in the earlier generation, the Seder wasn't miyakev. Anywhere, any Seder you're going to have is going to be good. But from the fact that they take this whole discussion seriously, what's the whole shayla in the first place? If you say that you don't follow archaeology, you have to have a Masara Ish Mipish of Moshe Rabbeinu. And if you don't have a Masara, even if you're right, you're not right by definition. Everything has to be with Masara. So what was the whole problem that they found Tefillin de Rabbeinu Tam and Kevi Yechezkel? So these are the two versions of why the Beis Halevi, why Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik was opposed to the Radziner Rebbe's Techeiles. The Soloveitchik family claims, all of the American branch and the Israeli branch, they all claim in the name of the Beis Halevi because the Masara was lost and you can't reconstruct the Masara. Masara has to be Ish Mipi Ish, Moshe Rabbeinu, that we heard from religious Jews in an earlier generation. This is the way to do it. You can't reconstruct the Masara. And the others say, and the acquaintances sent a letter to the Radziner Rebbe. The Radziner Rebbe printed their letter. He says, if you come up with a different fish, and you'd explain historically why the Techeiles disappeared in the days of the Geonim, I'll be the first one to go along with you. But you tell me that it's the cuttlefish. So it can't be because our grandparents knew about that fish and that it spits out the black dye, and they didn't use it. So it's as if we have a Masara that you're wrong. But he says you don't need a Masara. It's a glaring contradiction. What the Beis Halevi said. There's a very big Talmid Chacham who used to be in Flatbush, Rabbi Feivel Cohen, the author of the Svarim HaShulchan Aruch, the Badei HaShulchan. So he was the rabbi in a shul in Flatbush, and he used to give shiurim every week. And he wanted to go spend time. He wanted to spend a year in Eretz Yisrael to get shimush, to pick up shimush by Rabbi Yashiv. So he told his balabatim that he wants to give up his rabbanis. So they said, why? Everybody gets them, they like him. So he said he wants to get shimush by Rabbi Yashiv, and it's not fair that he should ask them to hold his rabbinical position for him for a year, and then he's going to come back. He's going to go away for a year. So they loved him so much that he said, you go to Eretz Yisrael, spend as much time as you want, and it's your position. When you come back, you'll continue to be our rabbi. He spent a year there by Rabbi Yashiv. He's a very big Talmid Chacham. His svarim are exceptionally beautiful. So when he came back, he maintained a kesher with Rabbi Yashiv. He used to correspond with him. Rabbi Yashiv hardly writes to anybody. So he maintained a kesher with him. So he sent him a letter regarding this Techeiles. He explained there are two versions of what the Beis Halevi said. Which version does he think is correct? And so then Rabbi Yashiv said he doesn't understand the version of the Soloveitchik family does not make sense to him. He thinks that the other version is more correct. Not that you need a Masara Ish Mipish. And the Gemara, you see, you can restore a Masara based on archaeology. He thought that He thought that the Soloveitchik family version is not correct. The other version is more correct. So then Rabbi Feivel Cohen asked him, so what do you say about the new Techeiles? If you don't have to have a Masara, so what do you say? So he said he doesn't know. He has to think about it. He doesn't know. So the story goes that the people from the Techeiles factory in Eretz Yisrael went to Rabbi Yashiv. They made an appointment. He gave him a whole presentation. So he asked them, how much does it cost for a pair of Techeiles? So they said something like whatever, $100 for a pair of Techeiles. Then he said, do you have 50,000? Do you have available 50,000? So they said no. So then he said, what's going to happen if tomorrow 50,000 people will ask for Techeiles? How much will it cost? So they said, we don't have 50,000. We're going to have to charge much more money. if it's going to be such a great demand and we have hardly any supply, it's going to cost more. So he said, I can't put on Techeiles. I can't put on Techeiles because I'll be putting people's lives in danger. And he explained what he means. He says, people always want to know, what do I do? There are people in Meir Sha'arim, there are people in Bnei Brak. He said there are around 50,000 people who want to know Dafka what he does. And whatever he does, they're going to spend money. He says, as it is, they don't make enough money to give enough nourishment to their children, to their family, and they're undernourished. And he says, if people will find out that I'm wearing Techeiles, tomorrow 50,000 people will spend all the money that's necessary to buy the Techeiles. And as it is, they're undernourished. They're not healthy because they don't spend enough money on healthy food. So I can't do it. I'll be putting people's lives in sakana. Shai, that's a beautiful explanation. So one of the Chachamim, one of the brilliant people who was there at the meeting, put out a book, and he wrote up the whole story in the book. The Rabbi Yasher said the reason why he's not using Techeiles is because he's going to put people's lives in sakana, saying that if you're not worried about your sakana, so you should wear the Techeiles. So they told Rabbi Yashin that someone who was there by the meeting wrote up the whole thing. So it doesn't help that he's not wearing the Techeiles. So he asked them, he has no time. Please, someone write in my name that I don't hold from the Techeiles. So someone wrote that tshuva that was printed, that was mentioned earlier. Rabbi Yashiv's tshuva. Someone wrote that tshuva, and then they publicized it. It was printed in some Torah journal. So then the next day after it's printed, someone meets Rabbi Yashiv, and he says, I saw your tshuva that you quoted the Arizal, that it only makes sense to wear Techeiles bisman shabbos hamikdash hayikayim. So he said, I didn't write that tshuva. What do you mean he didn't write that tshuva? It has his name. He asked someone, write in my name that I don't hold from the Techeiles. So the person wanted to schmaltz it up. So he said, because the Arizal says it only makes sense bisman shabbos hamikdash hayikayim. So Rabbi Yashiv said, it can't be. The Arizal is not going to say something against the halacha. The Arizal is coming to explain historically how did HaKadosh Baruch Hu allow such a tragedy to occur, that the identity of the Chalozin and the ability to fulfill the mitzvah of Techeiles was lost. How can HaKadosh Baruch Hu be so mean to us to allow such a tragedy to occur? You should have seen to it that it should be preserved. So that Arizal is just explaining the Iker To'elis of the Techeiles only makes sense bisman shabbos hamikdash hayikayim. After the Churban Abayis, he's still mechuyev. The Tanoim and Amorim lived after the Churban Abayis. Until the days of the Goyim, they still had Techeiles. He's just explaining historically, but not saying halachically that there's no mitzvah to put on Techeiles. And what does it mean that historically it's not such a great tragedy if the Techeiles is lost? So they explain, I think the Satmar Rebbe has this in one of his essays that he published, that there's a Gemara in Brachas that says, when you see the beautiful sky above, so you say a certain bracha. So then the Gemara said, but we don't say that bracha anymore, because since the days of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, the sky is not the right color blue. Bisman shabbos hamikdash hayikayim, the blue sky was a different color blue. So that's what the Arizal says, that the Techeiles is supposed to be dama l'rakia, and the rakia has the wrong color blue, so that's why the din of Techeiles still applies, even bisman she'ein beis hamikdash kayim. But since it's a different color blue, so the Iker To'elis is not there, so it was lost. But he never really said that, Arizal never meant to say at all that the mitzvah doesn't apply. I remember when one of the representatives from the Chevra who make the Techeiles, when he came to the yeshiva, he wanted to give me a presentation one day of the Techeiles. I said, why only give to me? Let's announce that at the end of the Seder today, I'll give a presentation, the last 45 minutes or the last hour of the Kol Seder. So he said, fine. So he gave a presentation. After he gave the whole presentation, I said, okay, I agree that it's at least a suffix. I don't know if it's a vade. I agree it's at least a suffix. I want to buy the Techeiles. Maskim, I want to buy it. So they said they don't have it yet. They didn't begin to process it yet. They're planning to do it. So I said, when you do it, I want to buy it. So that's when I started to use it. I think it's at least a suffix deraisa l'chumer. It's at least a suffix, even if it's not a vade. A suffix deraisa l'chumer. So misafik, you have to use Techeiles. There are some who argue the point and say that suffix deraisa l'chumer only means the following: if I have a suffix, whether I have a chiyuv to do a mitzvah, so I should go l'chumer and do it. So I know for sure that I was yotze the mitzvah. But here Even if you'll put in the Techeiles, he's still not sure. Even after you use the Techeiles, still not sure whether you have accomplished anything. So some poskim hold that Sofik Deraisa L'Chumra doesn't apply in such a case. It only applies in a case where after saying L'Chumra, then you know for sure that you were Yotzei the mitzvah. So Rabbi Menachem Zembe, who was killed by the Nazis in the Warsaw Ghetto, writes about this in one of his Svarim, and he writes that idea appears in the Shulchan Aruch Harab, the Balatanya Shulchan Aruch, that you only apply, and other poskim also have it, you only apply Sofik Deraisa L'Chumra in a situation where after going L'Chumra, you know for sure that you will have fulfilled the mitzvah. But he said that's not the accepted opinion in the big Shulchan Aruch. And he quotes Beferish, that if it's the first day of Sukkot and you didn't shake the first day of Sukkot, mitzvah to shake the lulav is min haTorah. The rest of Sukkot is only with the Rabbanan outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So the first day of Sukkot, if you didn't shake the lulav a whole day long, and now it's already Ben Hashmashis of the end of the day, so then we say Sofik Deraisa L'Chumra. Maybe Ben Hashmashis is Yom, and you're mechuyev to shake the lulav during Ben Hashmashis b'li bracha. But even if you shake the lulav Ben Hashmashis, you don't know, maybe you didn't fulfill anything. Maybe Ben Hashmashis is Laila, you have accomplished nothing. So Rabbi Menachem Zembe says, you see from the Shulchan Aruch that you apply Sofik Deraisa L'Chumra even in such a situation where after going L'Chumra, you still don't know whether you have accomplished anything or not. I remember many years ago, I must have spoken about Techeiles, I don't know. Someone meets me in Los Angeles. I was there for the OU weekend. I was in the end of December. For many years I used to go. So someone asked me, are there any sources in the Talmud that the Techeiles is poisonous? So I said, what do you mean? He tells me he works for the federal government. There are regulations that you're not allowed to use dye in a jacket or a sweater or a tie that has poison, because little children will chew on the sweaters. And if it has poison, they may get sick. They may get sick from sucking the poison. So that's what his job is, to test all the dyes and all of the clothing to make sure nobody's violating this federal law. So he, for the heck of it, so he tested the color of the chalazon, of the dye that they use now that they call Techeiles, and he says it is poisonous. It is a little dangerous. So after I understood what he's talking about, whether the chalazon is poisonous, I told him that Rashi in his comment, I don't know of any Talmudic passage, has said Rashi in his commentary on Chumash has an argument with the Rambam. What color is the chalazon? What color is the Techeiles? Is it dark blue or is it light blue? So the Rambam writes it's the color of the sky in the afternoon. Rashi says it's the color of the sky at night, at midnight. Why? Techeiles is lashon tichla, death, and Techeiles is supposed to represent makas b'choros that took place. Hashem he called b'chor. We should read by looking at the dark blue, the dark of the midnight. We should reminisce about makas b'choros. So I said maybe according to what Rashi interprets. I don't know where Rashi got it from. Maybe that's in a medrash. I don't know. Maybe according to that, it makes sense that it should be poison. The Beis HaLevi has an interesting comment. Maybe I'll close with this. Beis HaLevi has a tshuva about Techeiles. He discusses the din of Bal Tigra. When does one violate Bal Tigra? So Rashi and Chumash sounds like he says, if you have a talis that has 4 corners, you only put tzitzis in 3 out of the 4 corners, you're in violation of Bal Tigra. If you have tefillin, instead of having 4 parshas, you only have 3, that's a violation of Bal Tigra. So the Beis HaLevi quotes a Rashba, and I think in Maseches Rosh Hashanah, based on the Rashba, he's not happy with that Rashi al Torah. He thinks that that's not Bal Tigra. If you wear tefillin that only has 3 parshios, you're just not Yotzei. So that's not Bal Tigra. You're mevatel mitzvah of tefillin. If you wear tzitzis that only have tzitzis in 3 corners, doesn't have in the 4th corner, so the Mishnah has a machlekes hatanoim. Rabbi Shmuel holds that you have 3/4 of the Yom Mekayim. Each corner is another mitzvah, so you Mekayim 3 mitzvahs and you missed 1 mitzvah. And we paskin against Rabbi Shmuel that the tzitzis in the 4 corners are ma'ak from zeh. So if you're missing tzitzis in one of the 4 corners, you have 0 kiyum mitzvah. You're not yotzei anything at all. So we pass like that. So that's what the Beis HaLevi says. That's not Bal Tigra. If you're not yotzei in the mitzvah, you're not yotzei. So when do you violate Bal Tigra? So one example he gives is, the Mishnah has an example. If you have a korban chatos that's supposed to have zrikas on 4 karnas on mizbech, and you only do 1 zrika. So we paskin b'di'evid, that's a machlokes b'sham and b'sil. We paskin b'di'evid only one matana, one zrika is ma'akev. So he did one zrika, the korban is kosher, but you only yotze b'di'evid. So the Mishnah in Zvachim said that's an example of Baltigra. The Beis Halevi says the same by tzitzis. If you have Techeiles and Lavan, that's a mitzvah b'shleimus. If you put in Lavan without Techeiles, or Techeiles without Lavan, you only become a mitzvah shelo b'shleimus. So that's a violation of Baltigra. So how did the Jews wear tzitzis all the generations? They wore Techeiles without Lavan. So the Beis Halevi says that was esei doicha lois esei. Since the Techeiles was not available, so under the circumstances, the mitzvah to put in Lavan is doicha the avera of Baltigra because we had no choice. It's a yapshel l'kaim shnei. But if you live in a generation where the Techeiles may be available, it could be that what they have is Techeiles. Some are convinced that it's absolutely the case, and it's at least a suffix. So if you have Techeiles is available, you don't use it, then you'll be in violation of Baltigra. So wouldn't it be better not to wear tzitzis at all? Those who are afraid, they're afraid to get involved. So let them not wear Arba Campus at all, because by wearing Arba Campus, if you don't wear a garment with four corners, you're not mechuyev to wear tzitzis. If you wear a garment with four corners, then you're mechuyev to put in tzitzis, and you're not putting in tzitzis. And you could have. We have the Techeiles available, you don't put it in. So that's a violation. So shen besa not to wear the whole Arba Campus in the first place. That's what the Beis Halevi writes. So I think it's what to consider seriously, that it's not really right that people don't avail themselves of the Techeiles. We live in a generation that, Baruch Hashem, things are picking up for the Jewish people. There's more learning, and in a certain sense, there's more shmiras hamitzvah. So this, ben Hashemayim, they were mezakas. I enjoyed the presentation before. How can we decide, based on the historical proof, that how can it be that Ben Hashemayim, they're not going to give our generation the schus? Who says we have the schus that we got Medinas Yisrael? That's a fantastic. Who would have believed that we got Medinas Yisrael? Thank you very much. I enjoyed the evening. I listened to all the drushes from the beginning to the end, and I hope mine was also a bit of a contribution. Everyone should be healthy, and next year you should have again a Yarchei Kala on Thanksgiving.
Mitzvah Hashem. I want to thank Rabbi so much for Rabbi's time tonight and Rabbi's insight.